Thank you, Randy. Well, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Doug Medley with CAD Desk Consulting Resources. And today we'll be doing a Civil 3D State Kit webinar series presented by the FDOT. And as Randy said, the topic for today is the FDOT Survey CAiCE Design Deliverables in Civil 3D. And again, this is part 2 of 2. Now, the topics that we're going to cover today is we are going to cover the LandXML Visualizer tool and the LandXML Grouper tool. Now, both of those tools are actually part of the FDOT State Toolkit. And then we'll be covering a tool that's part of Civil 3D called the CAiCE Translator. Now, once we get into Civil 3D, we're going to talk about survey databases, how to set up a survey database. We're going to talk about importing LandXML data that we have gotten from various sources. We're going to talk about why we use a SurveyRD file and when we would use a SurveyRD file, which is a template that's part of the FDOT State Toolkit. We are going to then talk about editing survey figures. We're going to take a look at point groups and point display. And then once we've got all our data collected and cleaned up and the way that we need it to be, then we're going to start assembling some model files for deliverables, the TopoRD and the GDTMRD file. So the first thing we're going to take a look at is we're going to look at this LandXML Visualizer tool, which again is part of the FDOT State Toolkit. All right, and this tool was actually created by the FDOT in the central office, and we use it to take a look at LandXML files. So we'll take a look at that in our process. We're also going to look at the LandXML Grouper tool. And this is a tool that we use to bring in LandXML data and then put it into groups that we're going to use those groups when we import the data directly into Civil 3D. So we'll take a look at this tool in detail here in just a couple minutes. Now, whenever we're wanting to use the FDOT Civil 3D State Toolkit, we must start it by using the icon that either we find in the FDOT 2016.c3d desktop folder, and this folder is placed on your desktop when the State Toolkit is installed, and if someone may actually copy that icon directly to your desktop, but we must select that icon so that when we start Civil 3D, it will have all the proper parameters set, it will install the right applications, and we'll get an additional tab in our ribbon called the FDOT tab. Now, today we're going to focus on the Survey tab in the tool space. So, if you open up Civil 3D and your tool space isn't open, you would go to your Home tab, your Palettes panel, and you would pick on the tool space icon, and then your tool space would appear. And then pick on the Survey tab, and we're going to be working with this area right here called the Survey Databases. Right? We're also going to be looking today at the Toolbox tab in the tool space, and usually it's just below the Survey tab. Now, this tool underneath Miscellaneous Utilities is called the CAiCE Translator, and we're going to focus on the Import CAiCE project file. Now, what's important about this CAiCE Translator command tool is it allows us to import specify elements of a CAiCE project into an AutoCAD Civil 3D drawing. What's really important is that the resulting entities that are brought in through this import process are full-featured AutoCAD Civil 3D objects. It's not just bringing in polylines. It could be bringing in an alignment. It could be bringing in valid Civil 3D point objects. It could bring in a valid Civil 3D surface made up of maybe points and faces. Okay, so the one that we're going to focus on is the import a CAiCE project database. So in order to do this, you have to have access to a CAiCE project that has been worked on, whether you're an FDOT employee and you have access to it internally, or whether you're a consultant and you have access, you've got access to that database. In order for this command to work, you have to have the full database. Okay. Some of the other things that we can bring in is we can import a CAiCE surface triangles. We can bring in horizontal alignment data. Okay. All right. Now, To import an entire CAiCE project into an AutoCAD Civil 3D drawing, the PT4 file is the CAiCE project file that can contain any of the following data. So basically, you have survey data or you have your survey change. And then in that, you have different options. Under survey, you can bring in points. Under survey change, you could bring in the survey chain name, which would bring in all the survey points that are part of that chain. All right, and we'll take a look at that. All right, so let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is, before we go any further, is let's take a look at the data that we're working with. So I have a project. It ends in 11111. So I go down to my survey folder. It's where I'm storing my data. And I have a folder that I've created called CAiCE. And in that folder, I have an XML file. Now, this XML file is for State Road 57. Now, this file was created by exporting it out of the CAiCE application. All right? So they bring the data into CAiCE. They work with the point data, they create alignments, they create surface, they do all their editing and their cleanup, and when they're done, they export out this LandXML file. Okay? Now, I have another folder in here that has the actually CAiCE project. And in there, I have all the different files that I need. Remember, I was saying that in order to bring in a CAiCE project, we need a PT4 file? Well, there it is right there. So this is the data that I'm going to be working with today. Now, before we get started, on my desktop, I have my FDOT 2016 .c3d folder. And again, these are all the tools that are installed on my desktop when the FDOT State Toolkit is installed. All right, by your CAD manager, by your IT department, by yourself if you have rights and privileges on your computer. So what we're going to do first is we're going to look at this LandXML visualizer tool. So I'm going to double click on it. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to say Open. All right? I'm going to go to my Civil 3D project folder wherever it's stored. It could be locally, it could be on your file server, on your network. Okay? I'm going to go into the project, and again, this project, was set up by using the FDOT Project Create tool, so it has all the proper directory structures in it. All right? Because the FDOT State Toolkit is very structured in terms when you're creating a new file, it's looking for a project, and then it's looking for a particular directory to place that file in based upon how that tool is set up. All right, so we're going to pick on this 433431_SR57.xml file. And again, this is the file that was exported directly out of CAiCE. So we're going to select it. We're going to hit Open. So you can see on the screen we've got some graphics now. Now, if we look over here in the Plan View tab, you'll see that we've got two groups. We've got our COGO points, which is our survey points, and we've got our plan features, which is our survey chains. So let's take a look at the COGO points first. So these are just our plain survey points. So if I pick on any one of these points and I right-click, I can pick on the option Center On. Okay? And it will center the screen to where that point is. If I use my scroll wheel on my mouse and push it up, I can zoom in to that particular point. Let's pick another point. Right-click, Center On, and it just allows me to bounce around the drawing and just look at the data. Okay? All right, let's minimize this. Let's expand out our plan features, and let's pick on this plan feature here, and let's right-click and say Zoom to, and now what it does, it highlights that plan feature, that survey chain for us. Now, if I expand it out, I can start getting more information. Okay, so now I can drill into the chain. So there are the points that make up the chain. Okay, if I pick on any one of those points and right-click or just pick it, you'll see how the little glyph on the screen will show me which point that I'm selecting is part of that chain. Okay, so it's a great tool. It lets me take a look at survey points and survey chains. Now, at the bottom of the screen, I've got a number of options. The very first option that looks like a mountain range is the old zoomed all. So if I pick on that with my left mouse button, it's like doing a zoom extents. All right. If I pick the next option, zoom to dynamic, that's like the old zoom dynamic command in AutoCAD. Holding your left mouse button down, drag your box to the right and release it, and it zooms you into that area. Now, to the right of that command is a command called zoom recenter. So wherever I pick on the screen, that now, with my left mouse button, that now becomes the center of the screen. All right, so basically it's just a zoom center command. Okay? And then if I want to zoom in, I use my scroll wheel. Now, I also have two magnifying glasses, one with a dash, one with a plus. If I hit the magnifying glass that has the dash, that's a zoom out. If I hit the plus, that's a zoom in with my left mouse button. I also can, with my left mouse button, hit the arrow that points to the left and move my screen left, or the arrow that points to the right and move my screen to the right. All right? I also have an up and a down set of arrows. All right? So you can see that I've got a number of tools that allow me to move around on the screen to take a look at what I have in this XML file. I'm going to hit the mountain range again and do a zoom extents. Now, if this LandXML file had surface data in it, then I also have some information in here for surface shading, and I can display my surface very similar to what you would do in Civil 3D with visual styles. Okay? All right, so I know that I have a valid LandXML file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close the LandXML Visualizer tool down. Okay? Now, the next thing that I need to do is that I'm going to open up the LandXML Grouper tool. So I'm going to double click on the LandXML Grouper tool. Okay. Now let's talk about what we have in this tool right here. All right, we're made up of some pull-down menus. We have the File menu, the Filter menu, and the Help pull-down. We're going to pick on File, and we're going to open a LandXML file. So we're going to go and pick on that LandXML file that we just viewed in the visualizer. We're going to select it, and we're going to hit Open. Right? So now, down here under LandXML Output, we now have two groups. We have our survey points. Right? Now, it's always a good idea to look at your data before we start the process of grouping things. So some of the things that I'm looking for is, it's got a point name versus a point number. Okay? It has, what zone are we working in? Is this going to be topo, DTM? Is it going to be drainage? Is it going to be utilities? And each district, has a zone designation. Okay, well, on this particular set of points that I brought in, you'll notice that under zone, there are not any points. And we'll talk about this while this is important. So we don't have any zone codes in here in this particular point file. Okay, so we do have some codes. We have an attribute, whether it's a feature or ground, or northing or easting or elevation, and then we have some descriptions. Let's look at survey chains. Right? Well, our survey chains, we have a name for our chain, and now we do have some zone information. So what zone is it in? Okay? And then we have some codes which they're going to use to match with, and again, an attribute, whether it's a feature or a ground. And then it lists all the points that make up that particular chain and any descriptions. Now, let's go up here and look under group filters. So under group filters, what we have is we have different filters that have been preset up for us. So if I pick on TopoRD chains, you'll notice over here that the filter criteria, it's not filtering by zones, it's filtering by codes. These codes right here. Okay? And it's not filtering by attributes. Now, if you want to turn on or turn off a code that you want to apply a filter to, what you have to do is you would select this filter, either right-click and pick on Locked to unlock it, or you can simply double-click on the icon with your left mouse button, and you can unlock it. When that becomes unlocked, now you have the ability to go in and modify the filter criteria for that filter. So I could check or uncheck any codes, or I could check or uncheck any, in this case, any attributes. Once you've made your changes, you double-click on it to relock it. Now, you remember how we looked at the survey points, and you'll notice that there are no zone. If we go down and look at the filter for the GDTMRD points, you'll notice that it is set up by default to look for Zone 1 and Zone 2 and the attribute of ground. Okay, now this is why it's important to understand the data that you're working with. So I'm going to give you an example. So if I want to build this group as it is right now, I right-click on the GDTMRD points and I pick Create the Group. So now what I have is I have my LandXML output. I now have a group called GDTMRD points. So I'm going to pick on it. And you'll notice I can pick all day. There's nothing there. The reason is because the filter was looking for Zone 1 and Zone 2. We don't have those options. So I'm going to remove the group by right-clicking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click on the GDTMRD points, and I'm going to uncheck Zone 1 and Zone 2. And then I'm going to lock that group. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Create the Group. And now you'll notice that because I have unchecked those two zones, it now will apply the filter correctly, and it will now build that particular group for me correctly. So it's important that you check your data after you created to make sure that that group was created correctly. Okay? Again, to remove a group, you right-click, and you can say Remove. So what we're going to do first here is we're going to go up to TopoRD Chains. We're going to hold the Shift key down, and we're going to pick a range from TopoRD down to TopoRD points. Okay, so we're going to build both of these groups in one shot. We're not going to make any changes to the filter criteria. We're going to right-click, and we're going to say Create the Group. So now, for the group called TopoRD Chains, we now have our chains. That looks valid, and we now have our points. All right? So you can see the process. Now, these filters were built so that when we bring the data into Civil 3D, into the survey database, that we will have these groups pre-built for us. And that will help us filter the data when we're starting to build different deliverables, like the TopoRD or like the GDTMRD file. So let's go ahead now and grab the drainage chains, and let's go all the way to the bottom of the list, and let's pick existing utilities, existing pipes. Right-click, and let's create that group. So you can see now as I start going through here, here's my GDTMRD chains, there's my points, right? There's my drainage chains, and there's my utility chains. So I'm happy with my data. All right. The next thing I need to do is to go up to File and save this as. Now by default, the grouper tool will use the name of the current XML file that we've opened up, which was 4334301_SR57, and it will add grouped to the end of it. That way I just know that it's a grouped file. So I'm going to hit Save. All right? And now I'm going to hit the red X to exit out of the LandXML grouper, and I'm not going to save the changes to the setting file. Okay. Now, before I go into Civil 3D, I'm going to open up the LandXML visualizer again. This time, I'm going to open up the file that I just created that ends in grouped. Now, the data essentially looks the same, except if you look under the LandXML file, now you can see that we've got these groups built for us. So now if I pick on the TopoRD points, it's going to be listing all the points that match that search filter criteria that we did in the grouper tool. All right. If I look at my plan features for my chains, those are all the chains that are made up of that filter that just came out of the LandXML grouper. All right, so let me pick on this one here and say Zoom 2, and there's the change for that particular filter that we applied. All right, so data looks pretty good, so I think we're ready to move on to Civil 3D. All right, so from the desktop, I have my icon for the FDOT 2016.Civil 3D. So I'm going to double click on it. And I'm going to start up Civil 3D. Now, at this point in the process, I'm not concerned at all about what drawing file that I'm working in. What I'm concerned about is the Survey tab. So with Civil 3D started, I'm going to go to my model space. I'm going to go to my Survey tab. And remember, if your tool space isn't open, go to the Home tab, Palettes panel, select on Tool Space. Also, you should have by default 4 tabs: the Prospector, the Settings, the Survey, and the Toolbox. If any of these tabs aren't turned on, if you look up in the same Home tab, Palettes panel, if the color around the icon is not blue, that means that tab is turned off. So you just pick on the icon, you get a blue hue to it, and now, in this case, the Toolbox tab is turned back on. All right, now, the first part of the process is that we have to tell the software, where do you want the survey database to be stored? So the way that we do it in Civil 3D is we select on survey database. And many of you have heard me say this before. When in doubt, right click. All right, so I'm going to go to the survey database, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say set the working folder. Okay, so on my computer, under Civil 3D Projects, under my project that ends in 11111, I'm going to slide down to the survey database or survey folder. Okay, then I'm going to hit OK. So I've now just told the software where I want my survey database to be stored in. Okay, my next step here is I'm going to right click and I'm going to say I want to create a new local survey database. And I'm going to call this survey database 4334301 _ State Road 57 CAiCE. And I'm just basically putting the CAiCE at the end of it so that I know that the data type that I'm working with is data that came from CAiCE. Right? I hit OK. Now, once I've created that new survey database, okay, I've got some more work to do before I actually start bringing in data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on the survey database and I'm going to right click and I'm going to pick on the option Edit Survey Database Settings. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need, under coordinate zone, I need to go to the box with the 3 dots. Okay. Under the category, I can pick the down arrow and slide down the list and pick USA, Florida. Okay. And then under the available coordinate systems, I can pick the down arrow and I can say NAD 83, State Plane, North Zone, US foot. Okay. Or if I know the coordinate system, I can just type in FL83-NF and basically shortcut the whole process. So once you start working, with the kit and you start working with the 3 coordinate system that we use in the state of Florida, it's probably just faster just to type it in. But either way, it gets you to the same spot. All right? Make sure that you put the letter F at the end. If you don't, what you end up with is you end up with meter. Now, anytime that you see a circle on the screen blinking like this is me hitting my control key to show you where my cursor is. So you see where it says meter? If I hit the letter F, see how it changes to US foot. Occasionally people don't type in everything and they wonder why things aren't coming in where they're supposed to be. All right, we're going to hit OK. Now, another very important step that you have to do is you have to take the slide bar and slide all the way down the list. And under Extended Properties, you want to tell it to create new definitions automatically, and you want to display any warnings. And what this does is there is data that's coming in that is what we call extended properties. Right? Things like what zone, right? Whether it's a feature or whether it's a ground attribute. If we don't check this box, that information is not available to us when we pick on a point. Right? It's very important that you check those 2 boxes. Right? Let's hit OK. All right, remember, I don't care what drawing I'm in. Right now I'm in just the default drawing that starts up in Civil 3D. Okay? So now I've got my survey database created. Now I'm ready to start importing data. Now, there are a number of different ways that we can import data. I can go to the Home tab, create ground data, and pick Import Survey Data. Right? It brings up the dialog that says Import Survey Data with 4 different sections. Okay? That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is go to the Insert tab. Import Panel, Import Survey Data. Same database. Right? Another way to do it is I could go down here and I could right-click on the actual survey database name, and I could go down to Import, and I could pick Import Survey Data from there. So that's the third method. And the last method probably is, and there's probably other ways, is I can go to what's called an import event. Now, every time we import data into the survey database, the software creates an import event. Now, those import events, you can actually, if you make a change to the data, you can right-click on the import event that you've just done, and you can basically tell it to re-import it, or you can right-click and delete it, and it'll delete all the data out of the survey database, and also off your screen, and then you can do your re-import again if you want to. But I'm going to right-click and say Import Survey Data, and now we're going to continue on. Now, at this point, I only have one survey database. If I have forgotten to go in to edit my survey database settings, or if I want to check them, I can just pick Edit Service Database Settings, and now you can see NAT 83, State Plane, North Zone, U.S. Foot, and you'll see that Extended Properties is set to yes. So I'm ready to go. So I hit Next. Now, it's asking me under my data source type, right here, what type of file am I using? Am I using a field book file? Am I using a LandXML file? Am I using an ASCII point file? Or am I bringing points from the existing drawing and loading those back into a survey database? We're using a LandXML file. Okay. So now I pick on the folder icon. Right. I go to my CAiCE folder, and again, it's under my project, and I've just got a shortcut to Survey. All right. Here's my CAiCE folder, and now I'm going to pick on the grouped file, the one that we ran through the LandXML grouper. All right, I hit Next. Now, at this point, I've got a couple things that I can do or don't have to do. Now, under coordinate system, the software is saying if the coordinate system in the LandXML file that I'm bringing in is different than the coordinate system that the current drawing is set up in, all right, they're going to be set up in, do I want to do a transformation? I don't have to do this, but it's a force of habit, FL83-NF. I'm just telling it, what it is. Right? I also want to slide up with my slide bar here, and I want to make sure of a couple things. I want to make sure that it's using the FDOT figure prefix database, and that's basically where it's going to do the required matching to the codes, so that when I bring in certain types of data, like my TopoRD file, that it knows what layer, what line type, what colors to use. Okay. I also, when I'm bringing the data in, I don't want it to insert a network object. I don't want it to insert any survey figures. I don't want it to insert any survey points. Okay? And I don't want it to process any line work. So I want to make sure that all those are set to no. All I want to do is bring the data directly into Civil 3D. Okay? Now, if I look at the data that's coming in under the LandXML data, all right, it just basically gives me all those different COGO point names, and these are those groups that we built, and these are those groups of chains that we built. All right, so I'm going to hit Finish. All right, so now, over here under Figure Groups, those are the groups that we told the software to create by using the LandXML grouper. So we've got TopoRD chains, and we look down here in the preview, these are the chains that we looked at. If we go down here under Survey Point Groups, under TopoRD points, those are all the points that are part of that group that we made by using the filter in the LandXML grouper. Okay? That's why we do this. If not, all this data would have come in. We would have had one figure group and probably one survey group, and that's it. Now, I've got the data. We've gone through the whole process, taking the raw LandXML file that came out of CAiCE, we viewed it in the LandXML viewer. We then brought it into the LandXML grouper. We then applied those filters to build those groups. We then created that grouped LandXML file. We came into Civil 3D. We told it where to store the data, what folder. We told it the format of created a new survey database, and we told it, the format of that database, what coordinate system is working in, and we told it to also bring in the extended entity data. If I go back out to my folder here, and I go up here under my survey tab, you'll now see that I have a folder here, 4334301 State Road 57 CAiCE. This is the actual survey database folder. This is where this survey database that we have over here is being stored, is in this folder right here. All right, now data is in. I'm now ready to go to work. So I go to the FDOT tab. I go to Create a File. When you open up the Create File dialog box, the very first thing that you always have to do is you want to check your project. If your project doesn't show up on the list, pick on Select Project, go to the location where your project files are stored, whether it's locally or on the network file server. All right. Go to Civil 3D Projects, in my case, and I'm going to pick on the project that ends in 11111. And I'm going to hit OK. That's as deep as I go. Now it's going to show up in my list. So I'm going to pick on this. All right, what discipline am I working in? Well, it's a roadway project. All right, file group. Well, we are working on survey design files. All right. Now, this little application is set up, I believe it's reading a text file out there somewhere, and it has different groups, and underneath the survey design file it's been set up that we can create a digital train model, a drainage existing file, a survey development model, all the way down to utilities existing. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to create something called the survey development model. Now, in this project, at this time, there hasn't been any data placed in the survey folder. So that when I pick on the survey development model, the output file is going to be called servrd 01. If 01 exists, the counter would go to 2 or to 3, depending upon what's in the file, in the folder. Now, if someone had gone in, if they created this file and they renamed it to like servrd 10 instead of 01, when we come back into this folder, the software is going to go back to 01. It's not going to start at 10. It's going to go back to 01 and build up till, if you did 9 of these, until it would get back to the counter of 10. So just remember that if you rename them externally, then you'll notice there'll be some issues. Don't try to rename the file here. Rename it outside in Windows Explorer. Now, so here's our file name. Here's where it's going. It's going in the survey folder. That's why it's important you use the FDOT Create Project tool to create your project so the directory structure is correct. All right, it's using a template called the survey.dwt. Okay, that's supplied in the State Kit. And then the template path, it's finding this off of the C drive where the FDOT State Kit is stored when it was installed. And we're going to go ahead and set the coordinate system at FL North. Now, if you forget to set the coordinate system, at the command prompt, you can type in set FL North, and it will automatically set the coordinate system up for you to the right coordinate system. All right? So, survey RD, here's where it's going. Here's the template it's using. Here's where it's finding the template. Here's where the coordinate system is. Now, if any of these bars are in red, then you've got a problem where it can't find either the folder or the template, and you can pick the Browse button and go find the proper folder. Once we've got it, we're going to hit Create and open the file. So what it's going to do is it's going to open the file, all right, in the current session of Civil 3D. So I'm going to close my file out. All right? Now, I'm going to go down here to my status bar, and I'm going to set my scale at 1:40. Now, I'm going to think about my next step. Okay? The servrd file, think of this file as work in progress. Or back in the days when many of us were in high school or college many years ago, we had to show our instructor or our teacher our work. And that's really what we're using this file for. It's a way for us to bring in the data, manipulate it, and then use it later on for other things. So we're going to start out by working with the topo RD data. So we're going to go back to our survey tab. We're going to go to our figure groups, and we're going to look for our figure group called topo RD chains. Okay? We're going to right-click, and we're going to say insert those chains into the current drawing. So we just pick insert into drawing, and in they come. All right? Now, the next step is to take a look at the data. Is there any problems? Are there any errors or any things that sort of stand out that we have a problem with? Well, I'm going to zoom in. All right? If I hover over any one of these lines, it tells me that this is a survey figure. It gives me the name. It gives me the layer that it's on. Okay? It gives me any codes. Here's that attribute information that I told you when we turn those two switches on. I now know that it's a ground attribute, and the chain for the chain.zone is at 1. If we hadn't turned those attributes on, then that information would not display in this little tooltip that pops up. All right? Now, I know that when they went out and collected the data, this driveway probably doesn't look like a tennis ball with a nose on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select on this survey figure. And in Civil 3D, if I don't have anything selected and I select on a survey figure, I get a new tab in my ribbon. It tells me that I'm working with a figure. Okay, this is these context-sensitive menus now that Civil 3D uses. Now, it brings up all the tools that can be used with a survey figure. Right? I want to go over here to Survey Figure Properties. So I pick with my left mouse button. And it brings up a dialog. So it says, here's my name. Right? It tells me the layer that it's on. It tells me the style that it was used, right? It tells me, all this information on the LandXML, the code name, the attribute, and the zone. But what I'm looking at is down here, and it's showing all these different survey points. If I pick on any one of these points, you will get a glyph on the screen right here. Okay, remember, that's me hitting the control key. See the little glyph? If I pick on this one, it shows me which point that I'm actually working on. Well, when I look at this, under the geometry column right here, it says that all these are curved. Well, I have some options. If I pick on the first point and pick the down arrow, you can see that the geometry could be a point, a curve, or a curve break. Well, I'm going to reset that to a point because I know that's supposed to be a point. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to each one of those geometries and change it from curve to point. And as I do that, you'll see some things happening. Right? You'll see that on the screen, I'm actually editing that survey figure. I'm going to hit apply, and I'm going to hit OK, right? And hit escape, and now you can see that that survey figure has been edited. Okay. Now, I did it graphically on the screen, but what it's doing is when I pick on the survey figure, it's actually reading the survey database. Now, in order for you to be able to do the edits, your survey database actually has to be open. Right now, the survey database is open. If I right-click on it and I close it, it looks like this. Now, this is what some people do. If you double-click with your left mouse button, it will open up the survey database, but it opens up the survey database in a non-editable mode. What I want to do is right-click, close it, then right-click on it and say open it up for editing. And then any edits that I perform will be saved back. Okay? Let's pick on this survey figure. And it's got a problem. All right? It's got one piece of geometry that's set incorrectly when it was collected. So I'm going to change it to a point, hit apply, hit OK. All right, that looks good. All right, let's zoom down here. Well, I've got a fence. Now, that's not correct. So I pick on it, survey figure properties, and again, I've got a coding error. Change that to a point, hit apply, and OK. Again, everything that I'm editing right now is being sent back to my survey database, and I'll prove that to you here in just a few minutes. All right, so everything else in this file looks pretty good. All right, so I'm happy with the TopoRD chains. Now I'm going to go down to the survey point group, and I'm going to pick on the TopoRD points. All right, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say insert those into a drawing. Now, they came in as points, but they also came in as points, right? If I hover over a point, sometimes the tooltip comes up, sometimes it doesn't, so I have to assume it is a point. All right, if I pick on it here, it is a survey point. Here's my survey point properties, all right, and again, it gives me all this information. And again, there's this extended LandXML data that we were talking about. All right, it's important for us to have. All right, now, why did the survey points come in? How did the software know what layer to put them on? And how did it know what label to apply to it? Well, in our Settings tab, underneath Point, under Point Description Key Sets, we have a description key set, all right, called FDOT Survey. And so what it has a code. So when it brings a point in, if it finds a code that matches, it says, okay, if it matches the code AC, I want you to use a style called marker. I want you to use a point label style called elevation 0.2, all right? And that's how it knows how to match the right point style and the right label style to the point object when it comes in. So it's doing what we call description key matching. And all this stuff is pre-set up for you as part of the FDOT State Toolkit in this particular template because those description key sets are stored in this template. All right? So I've now got my data in here. I'm happy with the points. They look great. I'm happy with the way that my TopoRD chains are, so I'm ready to move on. Now, in the Survey tab, what I have here is I have under my figure groups, I have my GDTMRD chains. Now, I'm going to use those chains as break lines. Now, I have a couple ways that I can do this. I could right-click, and I could insert those into the drawing, and then I could pick those chains, and I could then use those to create a surface from. But I'm going to shortcut the process. There's an option here called Create as Break Lines. So I'm going to pick on Create as Break Lines. And you get a dialog box up that says Create Break Lines. Select the surface. I don't have a surface selected. So I'm going to pick on this icon right here to create a new surface. Okay? It's going to be a 10 surface. My surface, I'm going to call this State Road 57 _ existing. All right? My triangles, how am I going to display my surface? The style I'm going to use is triangles 1 to 1. Right? Hit OK. Okay. So now I have a surface to apply all these break lines to. Right? I hit OK. Right? It now says, okay, when you're adding the break lines, do you want to give it a name? Well, I could just call this, I could call it anything, State Road 57. What type of break lines? Well, we're using standard break lines because these break lines have elevation information on them. Right? So we're going to leave it as standard. I'm going to hit OK. And now I have a surface. Now the next thing that I need to do is I need to go down in under my survey point groups, and I'm going to bring in some survey points for my GDTMRD. But before I do that, I'm going to go to the Prospector tab, and I'm going to look at the point groups. Now you can see that I have a point group called TopoRD points already. So when I brought the TopoRD points in from the survey database, it created a brand new point group called TopoRD points. All right, I'm going to right-click on No Display and tell it to update. And the reason why that golden shield is there is a No Display point group was pre-built in the template, and so when we brought in the TopoRD points, I had to update that group so that it recognized those points that were brought into that No Display point group. All right, let's go back to the Survey tab. Okay, let's go down here to GDTMRD points. Right-click, and I'm going to say Insert those into the drawing. All right, so if I zoom in here, you're going to see I have some survey points in here. Now, I need to take those points that I just brought in, and again, No Display needs to be updated. I need to add that point group that I just brought in called GDMTRD points. So if I pick on it and I go to Properties and I list them, you'll see that those are all the points that came in from the survey database, all right, that matched those, remember the attribute that I had called ground. So let's go down into here now under my surface, under definition, and under point groups, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Add, and I'm going to add the GDMRD points. I'm going to hit Apply, and I'm going to hit OK. And all I've done is I've just added some supplemental data to my surface that I'm trying to create. Now, at this point, I'm probably going to save my file, because that's what Randy tells me to do. So I'm going to save my drawing. All right, now, the next thing I'm going to do is I might need to do a little bit of editing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the Escape key. I'm going to pick on my surface. Again, tells me that it's a 10 surface. I'm going to go to the Modify panel and say Edit the surface, and I'm going to say Delete the line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of my favorite selection methods. Is I'm going to hit the letter F for fence, and I'm going to draw myself a line, and usually I will go in, and then I'll usually come back out. Now you don't really have to go in and come back out. That's just a habit that I have. I'm going to hit Enter, and now I've deleted those lines. All right, I'm going to zoom over to here, hit F for fence again, and I'm going to come in and do a little cleanup here. Okay. And again, what's happening is that sometimes the software tries to triangulate across these corners and these areas that I don't want to triangulate on. Now, I'm going to hit Enter, all right, and everything looks good. Well, I've got a couple other settings that I want to check. So I go to my surface, I right-click, I go to Surface Properties. All right? I go to my Definition tab. Now, on my Definition tab, every operation that I have performed on my surface is kept track of. When I added it as a break line, I then added my point group, and here's where I did my 2 deletions. If for some reason I wanted to remove that edit that I had done, I can just simply uncheck it, hit Apply, rebuild the surface, and you'll see that the edits came back. If I want to bring them back, I can click it again, I can hit Apply, rebuild the surface, and the edits that I did have come back. All right? So that's just a good tool. Now, before I go to the next step, I'm going to save my file. I'm then going to select my surface. Now, you'll notice how when I got over my surface and I hovered over it, you see that the cursor gets this little double box. And the reason is that I've got a tool set down here under my customization on my status bar, and it is called, if I can find it, it's called selection cycling. So when selection cycling is turned on and I have two entities that share the same space, when I hover over them and then pick with my left mouse button, it will bring the little box. And then all I do is just roll my cursor, and you'll see that what it does is it will highlight either the survey figure or it'll highlight the tin surface. I'm not picking it, I'm just rolling over it with my cursor. I want to pick on the tin surface. Now my surface is selected. Now, I have two ways to get to this tool. I either go to the tin surface tab, General Tools panel, and pick on the Object Viewer, or I can right-click and pick on Object Viewer. Either one gets me to this viewer. Now, I'm looking at the surface that I have just created from the surface, the data from the survey database. Okay, I did a little editing. Now, under my Object Viewer, my current surface style is realistic. I'm going to change it to shaded with edges. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And you have to remember that when you change a visual style, you have to pick in the screen via left mouse button. If you don't and you use the scroll wheel, it will just cycle through the visual styles. So what I'm doing here is I'm just looking around at the data. Now the first thing I want to do is back out a bit, hold my left mouse button down, and drag it up and drag it around. And what I'm looking for are two things. I am looking for either a Christmas tree, which is a spike where I've got a point that's got a bad elevation, or I'm looking at the bottom for maybe a point below that maybe is a bad shot with a bad elevation that's giving me a hole. Okay, but this one looks pretty good. All right, so as I zoom in, you can start seeing things like I can see the road, I can see driveways, I can see ditches, right? And I've got an area here that we didn't collect any data in. But I'm pretty happy with what I've got. So I'm going to do a zoom extents, right, and zoom back in where I can see what I've got. I'm going to go ahead and save my file one more time. Now, a couple other things that I want to look at here is I want to look at my surface properties, and under my definition tab under build, you'll see that we have a couple options. Maximum triangle length by default is set at 100 feet, so I can't have a triangle any longer than 100 feet. All right, we didn't get the error message, but sometimes we'll get an error message where we get two break lines that cross. If you have that happen, you can change it to yes, and then you have three options. First break line elevation, last break line elevation, or an average. We're going to use the last break line. We're going to hit apply, we're going to rebuild the surface, and we didn't get the event viewer, so everything is good to go. Now, the next step is that we want to take this surface because it's clean and pristine, we're done with all our edits, and we want to push it out as a LandXML file. So we're going to select the surface, we're going to pick Export LandXML, we've only got one surface. All right, we're going to put it in the survey folder, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to call it surfrd underscore State Road 57 underscore existing. Okay, and that's just telling me that it's the State Road 57 existing, and if I want to go even farther, I can say existing surface, because I can actually export an XML file that might have surfaces, alignments, and other information in it. All right, hit save. Okay, so now I'm done with the surfrd file. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the FDOT tab. I'm going to create two new files. Again, put your eyes on the project, make sure that it's the correct project. All right? I'm in the file group survey design file. I'm going to create my topo existing file. Okay? So it's going to be topo RD01. Survey folder using the survey template. Set the coordinate system to FL North. I'm going to create and open the file. And since I'm in the create file dialog, I'm going to pick on the digital terrain model. That's my GDTMRD file. All right, because I didn't exit the survey design file dialog, I'm just going to, the coordinate system is already set, I'm going to pick create and open the file. And then I'm going to hit close. All right. So I'm going to go to the topo RD file first. All right. I'm going to set my scale to 1 to 40. Okay. Now, go back to the Survey tab. I'm going to start out by bringing in my topo RD chains. I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say insert those into the drawing. Now, the first thing that you will notice is, remember all the edits that we did? Remember the tennis ball with the nose on it? That's gone because the edits that we made in the SurfRD file were saved back to the survey database. That's why we do the editing in the SurfRD file. Okay? I'm going to come down here to my Survey RD point groups, and I'm going to pick on my, not my Survey RD, my survey point groups in my survey database, and I'm going to pick on my topo RD points. Right-click, and I'm going to insert those into the drawing. Okay? I'm going to save my file. And we have now, in less than a minute, we have now created our first deliverable for our survey project, the topo RD file. And this file will be used many times down the road. It will be used as an XREF for some files. We'll also use it when we start creating our existing condition corridor model, because it's going to use this file as targets for the super assembly that we use. Okay? I'm going to jump over to the GD-TMRD file. Now, this is where some people make a mistake. They go to the survey database and they start importing that information again. No, we don't need to do that. We've already done the edits on that surface, and we exported it out as that LandXML file. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to go over to here, double-click on my folder, and open up my LandXML visualizer. I'm going to go over here to File, Open, and I'm going to open up in my survey folder that surface XML file that I created. And now you can see that in this file we're looking at that surface. And now you can see that we have all these different options that we can use. How do we want to display? All right, do we want to do a spectrum? Do we want to use elevation? Do we want to use sloping colors? Do we want to fill the triangles? Okay. Do we want to show the vectors, which is showing the direction of the flow? Right? So again, this is just a great tool to allow me to go in and take a look at this XML file to make sure that it's got good data. It does. So I'm going to close out the visualizer tool, jump back into Civil 3D, okay, and I'm going to continue my process. So we're in the GD-TMRD file. Right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the Insert tab. I'm going to pick on Insert LandXML Data. I'm going to pick on this file. I'm going to hit Open. I'm going to hit OK. There's the surface. Now what I'm going to do is I'll select the surface. Up here under the 10 surface, I'm going to go to Surface Properties. And on the Information tab, I'm going to change the style to Triangles 1-to-1 Existing. All right, hit Escape, save my file. And so now I've just created the second deliverable that's part of the survey project. Now, you'll notice the Survey tab, again, we have drainage, we have utilities, so we will create all these other files pretty much in the same process. Now, in the time that we have left, let's go back to the FDOT, create a file, let's create another survey development model. We're going to call this one SurfRD2 because that's the next one in the list. Set the coordinate system, create and open the file, okay, and let's close the tool. And let's set the scale at 1 to 40. Now what we're going to do is we're going to switch out of the Survey tab and into the Toolbox tab. Okay. Under the Toolbox tab, we're going to go to the Miscellaneous Utilities. And we're going to pick on the CAiCE Translator and expand it out. And we're going to use the Import a CAiCE project, a PT4 file. We're going to double-click on it with the left mouse button. Okay. All right. Again, I'm going to go to my Survey folder. I have my CAiCE folder that I showed you earlier. I'm going to go into this folder and find the actual project. And there is that PT4 file. I'm going to select it. I'm going to hit Open. Now, when we get in here, it says, okay, when you bring in the data, we're going to start out with points and survey chain. So right now, I've got all the entities to be imported under points. My ground points, my feature points, my cross-section points, my user-defined points. Okay? Now, if I select on this icon here, it would pick all the survey figures. Now, when we use, I'm sorry, this one here, it would pick all the survey figures. When you use this, it would bring in those survey chains like it did in the TOPRD file, with the exception it doesn't put them on the right layers with the right colors. I believe they all come in on layer 0. For this example, we're not going to bring in the chains, but you could bring them in. So I'm going to uncheck that. So I'm just going to bring in the points. I'm going to hit next. Okay, DTM. This is my surface that it found in this CAiCE project file. How do I want to bring it in? I want to bring it in as points and break lines. Very similar to how we did it in the survey database. Right? Remember, we created a surface from break lines, and then we imported the points from the GDTMRD points group, and then we use that to create the surface from. Okay? Let's hit next. All right, now it also found some geometry chains. All right, those are your alignments. All right, I'm going to select all of those. You notice that the next button is grayed out. So when we hit import, it's going to import the points first. Okay. And it found there was a break line issue because a break line crossed another one. We can fix that. All right. Do a zoom extents. We zoom in, and there's our surface. So now what we have in here now is we now have a point group called all points. Okay, let me go ahead and update this one here. We have a surface called DTM. What we're going to do is we're going to select it and right-click, and we're going to change the style of that to triangle's existing green, so you can see the surface. Okay, and then we have 3 centerline alignments. We have our baseline 1, we have star 1, and we have County Road 259. So I'm going to pick on baseline 1 and say select, and you'll see that, see how it's highlighted? So there's your alignment. So what it's done, as we said right off the bat, is it creates valid Civil 3D entities from that import from the CAiCE tools. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and change my surface style back to simply a border existing green. Okay. Now, do you see how there are no points displayed anymore? Remember how the point group no display had to be updated? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pick on point groups, the category point groups. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to go to properties. And the way the software works is it says, okay, reading from the bottom of the list up, what do you want me to do? Display all the points. Then it hits that point group called no display, and it says, okay, that point group is set up not to display any point objects and not display any labels. So if I pick on all points, on the right-hand side here, I've got 4 arrows. Move it to the top all the way, move it up 1 bump at a time, move it down a bump, or move it all the way to the bottom of the list. I'm going to put it to the top, hit apply, hit OK, and I may have to regen my screen, and now my points have come back. All right. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to right click, all right, and I'm going to zoom in, and I've got some cross-section points here. All right. So let me see. Let's go to my point group called all points, go to properties, go to my point list, and I'm looking at all these different, pieces of information. All right. So see my raw description called XS for cross sections. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to build myself a new point group. So I go to point groups, I say new, I type in a name, XS, okay. I'm going to use a point label style where I just want to display the description only. I'm going to tell it to include all points with a raw description matching XS. Hit apply, double check my point list, everything looks good, hit apply again, hit OK. So now I have a brand new point group called XS. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to change the order of how these points are displayed. Now, back in the day when we were using Land Desktop or other applications, we were all taught to work with layers. All right? We're not working with layers. We're working with point groups now. We used to turn layers on or off to display the points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move no display up 1. So display all the points, don't display anything, and then only display the cross-section points. Hit apply, hit OK, do a regen, and what was wrong with that? What did I do incorrectly there? Properties, let's see, override, all right, Get that. Hit apply. Hit OK. Well, what did I do here? There they are. Just didn't see them. So what I've done now is I just went in and I built a new point group called XS for cross-section points. I then changed the order of how they're displayed in my list. All right, so I said display everything, don't display anything, and only display the point group. So I just wanted to show you how you could build a point group on the fly, and then how you could change the order of how they're displayed on the screen. So that's just another handy tool that we have inside of Civil 3D. So in this file, my ServRD file, I had a surface that came in directly from the CAiCE database. I brought in all these points from the CAiCE database. I then manipulated the points by creating new point groups manually because I didn't run them through a grouper, so it didn't create those groups for me automatically. And then it brought in the realignments. All right. Let me get back to my desktop here. So, what did we cover today? The LandXML Visualizer tool, the LandXML Grouper tool, which are, again, both part of the FDOT State Toolkit. I showed you this Civil 3D, CAiCE Translator tool, which is part of Civil 3D now. We talked about how to set up a survey database. We then set one up. We then imported the LandXML grouped file that we ran through the Grouper tool. We then into the survey database. We then created a ServRD file. We then brought in the TopRD chains and the TopRD points and did any of the required editing. We then created the GDTMRD file. We brought in the GDTMRD chains to create a surface from by using them as break lines. We then brought in the GDTMRD points and added those to the point group. We then did whatever editing that was required to the surface. We then exported the surface out as a LandXML file. Right? We then went in and we created two deliverable files, the TopRD file and the GDTMRD file. We set the coordinate system. And then we brought in from the survey database the TopRD chain points to create our TopRD file. And as you remember, the edits were there, and we didn't have to do any editing because we had done them in the ServRD file. We then, in the TopRD file, we inserted the LandXML file that we pushed out from the clean surface, and we created that file. And then we created an additional surface, a ServRD file, and we used the CAiCE Translator tool. So then I created a new point group called cross sections, or XS, in the ServRD2 file and showed you how you can manipulate the order of the point groups on the screen to change how things are displayed by bumping them up and down the list by using all points, no display, and then whatever points that you want to display above the no display. So, in saying that, thank you for attending today's webinar. If you've got any questions, please feel free to contact me. Again, I'm Doug Medley, CAD Desk Consulting Resources. I can be reached at 850-261-2585, and my email is dmm@caddesk.com. Okay, Randy, take it away.